players have proven yet again that nothing is too far-fetched to be spoken about. But tonight, the uncertainty over the implementation of the competency-based curriculum hangs heavy as hard stances threaten to undermine its takeoff. Now, the teachers are adamant. The government is unflinching. The students are more confused, while their parents are still hopeful. But in all this, the facts are lost in translation, depending on what category you fall. Tonight, we are getting educated on Sidebar. But first, it's my take. Now, the launch of the new competency-based curriculum has elicited a national debate, which, while healthy, threatens to cloud important issues. The new system, which will replace the 844, is already being rolled out from nursery school up to grade 3. And last week, Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha launched the policy framework for the curriculum, clearing the decks for reforms. And broadly, the CBC is learner-centered, placed a high premium on individual talent and interest, and removes obsession with summative national examination, which have come to define the current system of education. It seeks to create an environment where there are no failures, because each learner will be graded continuously according to their talent rather than pure performance in examinations. Now, the 844 system has been criticized for being too exam-oriented, teacher-centered and rigid, and with limited opportunities to align basic education with learners' interests, capabilities and aptitude. Obviously, the new system is a huge improvement on the 844 system, but the Kenya National Union of Teachers is not convinced, arguing that the change has been rushed and that the necessary training and infrastructure to usher it in has not been carried out. It has vowed to ignore the CBC and continue with the old system, a rather curious position, because records indicate that the National Union of Teachers has been involved in various meetings on the changes, including the National Conference on Education Reforms, which was held in 2016. Now, the union has a right to speak out on any issue that is considered affects majority of its members. It is difficult to appreciate such hardline positions at a time when the curriculum has already been rolled out. Now, the back and forth between the ministry and the union is not helping the public and is only breeding confusion and bewilderment. It is intrusive that the union has raised fundamental issues which cannot be wished away. Questions about public participation, quality of the teachers, training, and obviously the legal framework are critical in the reform process. We therefore ask the Education Ministry to convene a meeting with the union, not only because the teachers are principal change agents, but also to inspire public confidence, which is at an all-time low. If the system that will change the lives of millions of learners is to be implemented. Moreover, the ministry should appoint an independent task force with the express mandate of overseeing the implementation of the curriculum. In the words of Sidney Hook, an American philosopher, everyone who remembers his own education remembers teachers, not methods, not techniques. The teacher is the heart of the education system. My guests tonight, Dr. Julius Juan, Janet Ouko, and Amos Kaburu. My name is Ken Mijungu. Welcome to our program tonight. Join the conversation. The hashtag, as always, is Sidebar. At NTV Kenya, at Ken Mijungu. And because of your concerns, our lines will be open in a moment. You can call in and get answers to the probing questions. Sidebar is in class tonight.
Majagi came, nothing happened. Amina came, nothing happened. You are now there.
I want to go down in history as being fair to all Kenyan children.
There is no more professionalism in CBC.
What the hell do you want, and who the hell do you think you are?
There is 100% and above politics.
Why are we lagging behind? Because we spend too much time thinking about nothing. Talking about nothing.
Mwalimu amefundishwa miaka miwili kufundisha mtaala ule wa awali. Wasema ameiva sasa, anaweza kufundisha mtaala huu mpya. Tupeleka wapi nchi?
This politics has to stop.
This is one country, so many views and very simple issues. My guest tonight will talk about all that. But first, let me begin with you, Kaburu. Yes. The exchange between the top ministry officials, a member of parliament and a secretary general of Kenya National Union of Teachers. One, it shows there is a problem. Do you agree?
There is a problem. There is a problem. And for us to say that there is no problem, I think we'll really be burying our heads into the sand. But I think the most unfortunate part of this conversation is when we lose the plot and reduce this conversation into a contestation between the Ministry of Education and unions, which are basically just some two players, and forget that curriculum reforms are a very small component of the kind of reforms that we are talking about. And when you look at the papers, you look at the conversations that have been ongoing, I think they fail to address the critical issues. And the issues are curriculum reforms necessary? Yes, they are necessary. Why are they necessary? They are part of the larger educational reforms. But I think one of the things that has been lost in this conversation is to equate education reforms to curriculum reforms. And I think this is part of
I'm even more confused now. Yes. I'm more confused.
Okay, let's put it this way.
Okay.
Education is a function of a society because education is created by the society to address particular needs. And the first one is that the society uses education for its survival. That is the sense to say that the society has put in place education as an institution through which it socializes the future generations. And therefore the needs of the society for survival in future times are very critical. And as these needs keep on changing, and as the society's needs keep on changing, so the need for education system to match what we call functionality, to deliver what the society wants.
Okay.
Only that the most visible part of an education is the curriculum that it offers. And this is where we need maybe to break it down to make it simpler.
Okay.
That if you look at education reforms, they are larger than the mandate of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Because the KICD Act 2012 is very specific on what role they need to play. But it doesn't mean that what they deliver as the outcome, therefore determines the outcome of an education. So what you need to have in a really functional education is to look at the output of what KICD would have given you and ask yourself, what kind of framework do you need to deliver for this curriculum to work?
Okay.
But I think as it is right now, we're putting a lot of pressure, even where it is unnecessary. By imagining that the curriculum as designed, therefore, would answer all our problems. And lastly, Ken, this is the fallacy that we seem not to be getting right. That if by sorting out curriculum issues, you will have solved all the societal problems. That is not true.
And
I think we are really overestimating what education can deliver. And this is the kind of conversation that we should never lose. But amidst all this noise, when we reduce this conversation into a contest, we lose the bigger picture.
All right. Janet, we lose the bigger picture, but I want to take you back to where I began with him. The fact that there's that heated exchange, there seems to be misunderstanding among the stakeholders who should be giving us the direction. There is a problem. Is there a problem from where you sit?
Now, from where I sit, I know that curriculum reforms are one of the many reforms that the Ministry of Education has been undertaking. And I would jog your mind that there has been several reforms, beginning with after the promulgation of the Constitution, there was need to realign the sector to the Constitution. And therefore, we had reformed even the Basic Education Act, and so many other acts and so on were developed. That was probably where the reforms began. And this is, whatever is happening now is not unusual. We've had these discussions, you know, every now and then, every time that the Ministry of Education is going through an issue. We've gone through these discussions every time there was a policy development and so on and so forth. We went through these discussions when there were the issues of school fees, you know, revisions, there were all these staff wars. We went through this when we were saying that there were leakages in exams and so on, and those reforms, and we still managed. And therefore, I encourage the noise because it gives us an opportunity to really sit down and discuss, and also gives outsiders or the consumers of education an opportunity to actually listen, because what I think is that a lot of these discussions have been held probably among experts or at very high levels, but now I'm happy because Kenyans are getting an opportunity to really get to listen. And it's not bad when one person raises a concern. The only problem is when you raise a concern that doesn't look very consistent, you know, with the frameworks that we know that exist. For example, when you come out to the public to say that you are not consulted, when records are there that you are consulted, then that is where the problem really comes in. And at this level, and probably as we delve into the discussions, we would want to hear what exactly are the issues that whichever constituency is raising about CBC, so that then we can be able to address specific issues and we square them out, because we really need to move on. This is not a matter that can cause a whole sector to be discussing, and you know, there are so many things that need to be reformed within the sector, and the sector is ready to move on.
Okay, I'm going to ask this specific question to Daktari, but first, the reason why I'm asking if this is losing the bigger picture is this. Let's watch this.
If you want to war with us, we are prepared to go the full length, if you are ready.
Why are we lagging behind? Because we spend too much time thinking about nothing, talking about nothing. We should focus on issues that are measurable. Have you measured the thickness of my skin? You will find that when I was at the University of Nairobi, the skin became thicker than that of a hippopotamus. So stop wasting your time. So if you have something better, why don't you tell us what it is? Or shut up.
If we get it wrong, we shall damage millions and millions of children for many years to come. And no reform or review anywhere in the world can succeed if teachers are not on board.
Very interesting observations, and I'd like to ask you, Daktari, are we focusing on the real issues, and what are the real issues that the ministry wants us to focus on?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I think the first real issue is the Kenyan child. I mean, for me, that is the key issue, the Kenyan child. And let me take you back. Education reform is supposed to be a living thing. Actually, for us, we say curriculum reform these days is a living thing. UNESCO recommends that after every 5 years, we look at our system and see what we can do better. The current reform was done in 1984-85 when we started it. We did some review in 2003, but let me start it from there. When we went into 844, it was basically because at that time, the 100% transition from primary to secondary school was not there. So there was a lot of wastage of learners at the end of primary schooling. So we decided, let's take it up to 8 years. The learners get a little maturer. Let's introduce technical subjects so that those who are not able to proceed to secondary school have some skills that they can take to the job market.
Okay.
When we go to 2003, again, there was a review. The technical subjects were removed. Then you were left with our academic content, subjects. So it means we didn't think back and realize why we started it in the first place. Now it meant that learners who went up to standard 8 would leave worse than even before, because now the technical subjects were not there. And you can see the number of wastage that we had until recently we started the 100% transition. Now what we are going back to was started when you looked at the ticket report of 2000, the COEH report. The recommendations were very clear. Our system has reduced it to rote learning because it is so much exam-oriented that let's expand space. Let's introduce the technical subjects that we had removed so that learners can start acquiring skills that can help them in life at whatever level. That went like that. Much of it was not implemented because people said it was very expensive. Then after the promulgation of the Constitution, we had the Odhiambo Task Force. They went around the country, they collected views, they met experts, came out with a wonderful report. What did they say? Our system is too much examinations oriented. Let's have a system that takes care of all the learners. We call it, learners can go into various, areas of learning depending on their ability.
Okay.
that was brought to the table. On the day when this was supposed to be adopted, I think probably those who were there, like Janet, will tell us what happened. Then we continued. Now here we are, several years later, we are still complaining that we don't need to move to the next step.
And you don't think we're complaining rightly?
Honestly. Let me give you an example, because as it, last year, that is, we had about 660,000 learners who sat KCSE. This year, we are admitting about 90,000 to the university. The others, 570, we have told them that they can also join other technical institutions. Not that the technical institutions are bad, but we have not given them an orientation during the learning process to appreciate that these are alternatives, not something that you go to because you have failed to achieve something.
And that's how it feels like right now.
It is a disaster.
That's how it feels like.
So what are you doing with those 570? That's why we need a differentiated learning.
Okay.
Let as people are coming up through the school system, they know that if I can't do that, I have an alternative.
I would really have wished that this was done practically and tested before it's rolled out. But what we are seeing is this is rolling out. And if you don't think the train has left the station, watch this space. This train has left. I would think that it should have been tested somehow.
I strongly feel that both parties who are playing protagonists in this discussion are not being very honest with Kenyans. Because it is not Sosion who came to the steps of KICD on 15th of December and said that Kenya was not ready for rolling out the curriculum. It was the highest.
Yes.
Executive Order number 1 of 2013 places the responsibility in the hands of a cabinet secretary. So when a cabinet secretary comes out having consulted her own highest organ called the steering committee and makes this statement perplexing to the whole nation that throws everyone into panic that the country is not ready for the rollout of a curriculum.
Yes.
I think we must appreciate that the level of panic that the CS caused.
At that time. I remember it.
Kenyans are yet to recover from it.
Yes.
That is one of the things that Kenyans really need to appreciate. But on the other hand, some of the allegations being made by the unions are not very, very genuine.
Like which one specifically?
One of them is by arguing that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with 844.
Okay.
For you to make such an outrageous allegation, I think it will really be an insult to the Kenyan intellect. So I think that for me, as far as process is concerned, both parties are really as guilty as charged.
But it's for argument's sake. It's for argument's sake that they're saying. Yeah, they're saying it's not entirely bad because there's a whole generation
really
that has gone through
much more
844
in terms of building public confidence, because education is supposed to be managed and run by the executive. It is not the responsibility of civil society organizations. It is not the responsibility of unions. Kenyans have elected a leadership. And that's why I am not shy of commending His Excellency the President for being the change champion for this process.
Okay.
Because he believes, what do you need for you to succeed? And that's what he's actually really put on the table.
Okay.
So I think that we don't need to really treat the curriculum process like a Bermuda's triangle.
Okay.
Say that we really don't understand what goes inside there. We really need to demystify and put all facts on the table. But when it comes to processes,
that has not been done. Before you go to processes, that has not been done, because one of the things they're raising, apart from just saying in a blanket way that 844 is not wrong, is not bad, they're saying that there was no adequate public participation done.
I don't think that that equally is right, because I do not think that there has been any reform process that has really undergone public participation.
Like this one.
Such as this one.
All right.
Because we're talking about a product of a task force that we're about
just
collecting public
across
views.
the board. Yes.
So I don't think that that's really, really honest. I think for me, these are three things.
Okay.
You're talking about planning for a whole curriculum. There is the whole element of design, which is highly technical. And if we get into that discussion, most Kenyans will actually be lost. And now we're really getting into the actual implementation.
Okay.
What does it take?
Well, I really don't know. And as you say, I have been privileged to be part of this process. I've been around for about 9 years when we've been discussing some of these things. And when I listen to anybody saying that there have not been consultations, I really
or
get
adequate on that.
Okay, forever, even if you want to add the adjective or whatever,
Okay.
adequate, fine. Let me ask you, 9 years consultations is not enough. Fine, tell us, do you want 20 years or 30 years or 40?
Then we begin from there.
We begin from there.
Yes.
But you cannot keep throwing in adjectives. The other day it was about teachers have not been trained. When teachers are trained, you say they have not been effectively trained. So sort of there's somebody who keeps changing the goalposts, and it's not fair for a process such as this one. I want to tell you that the minister currently, Professor Magoha, is the 6th minister since we began these discussions about the review of the curriculum. He's the 6th.
Okay.
All the way from Professor Simon Gary. He is the 6th. So when you come here and you want to make it look like it is a political expediency, it is not correct. And it's really fair for people to respect facts and state facts as they are without a lot of distortions. And then also, I would really like somebody who has been part of these discussions from the year 2010 should not be talking about process issues now. Okay. You are going to be dishonest, and your integrity is on the line, because you had the table. We sat at the steering committee with some of the people who are questioning the process now.
Right now.
And I want to ask them, what prevented you from presenting those very good ideas that you have now?
Was there democracy where
let them come out and say, we tried to raise the issues,
but it was voted against us.
Or there was this challenge. But you see, this thing called public participation, we must encourage ourselves to have integrity. Public participation does not mean your view must carry the day. It doesn't mean like that.
You just have to present your view.
You had an opportunity to present your view. You had an opportunity to shape a discourse. I think we must be gentlemen enough to know that it is not about my opinion, but it has to be the right thing has carried the day. I think it's about that.
Now I have a clue of who you might be speaking about, because you said gentleman. But
no.
Before you speak, Daktari, let's listen to this, because this is the genesis of the mistrust. In this is the genesis. Let's listen to this.
The CBC national pilot be extended for 1 more year. The national rollout will take place in January 2020. The delivery of the CBC will officially commence countrywide starting tomorrow in PP1, PP2, grades 1 to 3. I want to state also unequivocally from the outset that the successful implementation of the CBC must be our foremost priority and imperative. I can confirm to you here that His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and all relevant government agencies will accord us the support that we need and that will be necessary to implement this program. I therefore wish to reiterate that we must succeed and that we must roll it out seamlessly.
She left no doubt. We must succeed.
Yes.
She did not inspire confidence at that time. You have to agree with that.
Allow me not to go into that, but allow me to talk about the curriculum. For you to roll out the curriculum, you need 3 things.
Okay.
First one is the curriculum itself, what we call the scope and sequence, the designs, what some people can call the syllabus. That was and is ready. The next thing, you need to train the teachers, or let's say, give the teachers an orientation into the new curriculum. Now, that will always remain an ongoing process. And let me explain a little that before I go to the third one. When you talk of teacher training, and I have the privilege that I'm a teacher, I taught in a secondary school, I taught in a TTC, and taught for over 13 years in a university. When you're trained as a teacher, and I saw one of the members was talking about, you are never trained to teach a curriculum. You know, you're not trained to teach 844, you're not trained to teach 2, 6, 10, or whatever. You are given the general pedagogies and principles of teaching. And that is why, as I was explaining to somebody yesterday, you see our teachers, there was a time Kenya was exporting teachers to other countries. They were not going there to teach 844. We have Kenyans who train in Kenya and teach international schools that don't follow our curriculum. What they're given is an orientation.
Okay.
When you go through the training process, you are trained on the various methodologies of teaching. the lecture method, discussion, question and answer, and activity. Now, what we are doing now is nothing new to the teachers. We are doing an orientation of telling teachers that in this system, we have predominantly used the lecture method because you must cover syllabus, time is not there, you want to come and revise and pass the exam.
Okay.
Now we are telling them, move a little, it's a container, move a little towards discussion, activity, give the learners a chance to collaborate. As they do that, there are other skills that they acquire. They acquire to relate with one another, they acquire to respect one another. In fact, they even acquire to communicate and understand that we need to live harmoniously for us to get the right answers.
Okay.
Now, that is extremely, so when we take these teachers through the orientation, let there not be a myth that there's something so new.
Special that they're being given at that time.
These things were taught in college.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I've told you I'm a trained teacher. The third one is the curriculum support materials.
Okay.
Now, this can be looked at in a big way in terms of infrastructure and the learning materials. As it is now, books that are so critical to learning are being taken to schools. Now, let's talk about the infrastructure because I've seen a lot of talk about the infrastructure. Even in the current system, the government and its stakeholders has continued improving the infrastructure. Therefore, if you say that now we want to stop, this country will never have a new curriculum that addresses the needs of the learners because we are waiting for every infrastructure to be put in place.
We'll never implement.
We'll never.
Okay. I'd like to ask Janet, if she was listening to the CS just months apart, don't you think Kenyans have a reason to be very afraid of embracing CBC?
I don't think so, because I would really have wanted to know the background under which the CS was making, such kinds of remarks, and then barely 24 hours coming back to retrieve the same. So I don't know what probably could have happened. But having been around, the policy tables, in this country, I know that there's a lot that really goes on, and that is why in the last 2 years or so, we saw a lot of accelerations in terms of some of the things that we have yearned for so hard. Some of us, when we worked at civil society, we've lobbied and lobbied. But the leadership at the Ministry of Education, which is firm and really believed, and I would really want to give credit where it is due. A lot of this reform, sort of resuscitation at the Ministry of Education came with Fred Matiang'i. And I would really want to say that there's some level of focus that is so much so required when you're dealing with the Ministry of Education. It's not been very easy because the stakeholders are so various and the interests are also so much so huge. And so I really don't know the background, the backdrop where CS Amina was coming from to make those remarks and then retrieve the following day. But I would want to really say that at this point in time, I saw in the morning, the dailies in the morning, that the primary school heads have vowed to implement the new curriculum. Those are the heads of the primary schools. So when somebody is saying that teachers are not ready, I see a contradiction.
You read a lot of things.
There's a contradiction.
Okay.
And two, there are some critical issues that really are coming from the teaching fraternity, because we know the CBC is going to be demanding a lot more from the teachers. And truly speaking, there is a concern because you cannot deliver the kinds of service that is required of the CBC when you have a class of 100. So yes, it is not, nobody is saying that there are no issues. But what we are saying, can we separate issues? We cannot be discussing process issues at this time. Anybody wanting to draw us back to process issues is dishonest and is not doing a good job, even to their own constituencies. Because remember, the Ministry of Education does not work alone. All those members of the constituencies, and I don't know if Dr. Juan carried those documents, all of us have sat on the table. All of us have been consulted. So the problem is, when you come to the table representing civil society, do you go back to tell your members what was discussed here, so that then your members come here to tell us they were not consulted? Because the ministry cannot deal with everybody. The ministry can only deal with structures. If it is parents, there is a parent association. So they come to the table, they are told, do you go back to discuss with your membership?
All right. We have to take a break. Amos, I'm coming back to talk to you because you have to answer the same question, but we have a lot of feedback that I'll also be reading after we after this break. But remember, we'll be taking your phone calls in the next few minutes also, because you have a lot of questions that you're asking that I cannot answer. So we'll give you an opportunity. The phone lines will be running on the screen. But first, Sidebar takes a short break. We'll be back. Right, welcome back. And tonight we're talking about education matters, especially what KICD thinks is a good thing and the government thinks is its time has come. But there are a lot of other people who think it's not a time. In fact, top of those people who think it should not be happening is Kenya National Union of Teachers, which ideally should be on top of things. So to say, just a tweet here before Amos answers my question about what the reason why the CS had to retract. Ndungu Wainena says that question 1, where is the CBC pilot program reports? 2, where is the sessional paper policy and legal framework for CBC approved by Parliament? And 3, there is human resource assessment needs capacity report. And 4, Parliament has never approved budget for financing CBC. Why force it down? All right, questions to reflect on while we speak to Amos. Same thing, CS Amina comes out and says this will not happen for 1 more year, then suddenly retracts immediately. And I like to tell you from the top of my conversation with you at this time that there's a lot of thinking that this is really being channeled towards a particular goal.
Thank you, Ken. The reality of the matter is that the ministry has done very little to inspire public confidence in what it is doing. And we've seen in the last 2 years, save maybe for the last few months when we've seen a lot of tough talk, we're here to see whether the tough talk will deliver results. But what we witnessed from 2017 was a very, very low moment. You have a ministry that was pulling very different sides from what the commission was delivering. Those of us involved in big change will tell you one thing for a fact. One of the greatest game changers in making sure that the curriculum would have worked was the Teacher Service Commission. Unfortunately, the kind of signals that kept on coming from Upper Hill were never inspiring, because amidst a pilot program that was being rolled out, it never made sense why TSC got lost into pushing through some of the things that they were doing. Delocalization, which just served just to create a lot of
confusion in the public.
Confusion in the public. We need to understand that in the discussion around governance, you may have power, but what makes your power acceptable to become authority is legitimacy. And so government has done very little that will really legitimize this process.
Okay.
When you see a cabinet secretary issue a statement such as lower the entry grade for students getting into teacher training colleges, and after 2 terms, those students are really forced to come out, it really shows the kind of lethargy that we really witnessed over that period of time. I'm going back to say this. Kenya requires a new curriculum more than yesterday. Does it need CBC? That is another conversation altogether.
Okay.
We have something on the table. What would it really take for us to implement it? And that's why it's very fundamental that if I was government, I would really be so careful on cheerleaders, on this process, and begin to interrogate the issues that some of the people who are seen to be on the opposite side.
Do they have a point or not?
Because the point is,
yes,
government does not operate in a vacuum. Government has got clear mechanism and processes.
Okay.
Ask Kenyans, would you go for an election without an Elections Act? They wouldn't go for an election.
They'll say no.
Why are we so confident to implement a curriculum?
Without the legal framework.
Without the legal framework.
Okay.
And yet all of us can comfortably sit here and say that it's not a big issue, we can deal with it. I think these are critical
find it
issues
on
that
the
we
way,
really
we will
need
do
to
it on
ask
the way.
ourselves. And we really need to ask ourselves. I mean, if someone asked you, those of us who are seated on this table, if you went to a public school, the way I did, Chakalini Primary School in Lugari Sub-County, Kakamega County, and you are in class 4 being taught by Mwalimu Saul Mwiriza, do you have the confidence that Mwalimu Saul Mwiriza can
be able
deliver
to deliver
CBC as it is designed? If the answer is no,
then
we need to have some question marks. If the answer is yes, then
you proceed.
Good. CBC has left
a good way, a very good way of simplifying and looking at it. And I gave you questions to point out. I'll be coming to Janet shortly. But even as you answer the questions that were raised by Ndungu Wainaina, Koech says that the report, the Ndungu report, the Koech report, that you stated was rejected after the process culminated in a conference at the KICC. It was voted 51 to 25. Failing to pass, saying the country should go back to the report is insincere. I don't have the facts. I'm just reading what Josh Ruto says. So as you answer, yes.
Now, first of all, it's not the Koech report that was rejected.
Okay. It wasn't the Koech report?
No, it's not the Koech report.
All right. Okay.
It is the Odhiambo report.
Odhiambo report.
Yes.
which was not rejected.
Okay. So Josh Ruto, you got it all wrong.
It wasn't put to a vote.
Never
And
put to a
unfortunately, it is picked. Joshua has picked it from an interview somewhere else which has just ended, and somebody is quoting figures.
Really?
You know, that is why we are saying sometimes there are matters of integrity that when you are holder of particular offices, you don't just pass facts, fallacies as though they are facts.
That's why I put it to you. Okay. That's why I put it to you.
Explain something.
Yes.
You know, the Odhiambo Commission was meant to align our education system to the Constitution.
Okay.
I think that is extremely fundamental. There are things we have introduced in the Constitution. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If you look at Article 4, then link it to Article 10, that is, Kenya is a sovereign state founded on values and principles of governance, which are then highlighted in Article 10. And then now you go to the subsequent chapter, whether you talk of chapter 4, the Bill of Rights, chapter 6, if you look at these fundamental issues, chapter 6, which is on leadership and integrity, you go to, for example, Article 232, which talks about the values of public service. All these things are embedded in Article 4 and 10. Now, if you have a country that is trying to align its education to this particular constitution, why do you think Kenyans would throw that out? Because we need our learners to appreciate our Constitution, because our Constitution even appreciates our diversity, appreciates that we need to live together. So the factors that led to what happened in KICC, I think I will leave it to explain. But
how long ago was that?
2012.
2012. Okay, just 7 years.
But let me just give you a highlight of what the problem is. The Odhiambo report, other than the wonderful recommendation that it made, introduced what we have introduced now, recommended what we are introducing now. That because now the learners after primary school don't go to work, we have no business keeping learners in primary school for 8 years. And that is where the problem started. And that is the problem we have now. The idea of reducing primary schooling to 6 years is a big problem to some of the people who are making noise. And that is where the whole problem started. But we never went behind to see what is the basis of that recommendation.
Okay.
So that question, well, he should get his facts right.
Okay, he should, and I think it's adequately dealt with. He got his facts wrong. But there are also people who believe this is a good thing, like Kimathi, who says, we have for a long time called for a paradigm shift in our schooling system to ensure that learners are ready for the 21st century and beyond. And now it's time, there should be no turning back. But I'd like to come back to what he said, because there's a lot of issues here that Homa Bay Member of Parliament, Mheshimiwa Kaluma, has sent me that I also want to raise, because he's a stakeholder. But I'll go back to what he says. If this is as simple as to make my teacher in the village in Migori, Mr. Oyo, or Mrs. Matengo implement, then let's go forward. But if it's as difficult as to make them teachers themselves ask questions, then let's rethink of that. Do you agree with him?
Okay.
Yes. Let me hear Janet, then I'll come back to you.
You know, CBC is not a panacea to all the problems we've been having in the education sector. It is not CBC. We've had complaints about our teachers not being up to level. That has not been brought about by CBC. We've had issues with how our teachers are being trained. We've discussed this in forums. That is not, the CBC is not going to solve that. So we have so many other issues around education that require reforms. So this one is one of them, and we cannot place all the responsibilities of the sector and heap it on one subject, and we say, before we have done this, before we have done this. I think we are getting all this wrong.
Okay.
The thing is, let's get it from Dr. Joan. Are we talking about training of teachers? Because I think that is outrageous.
He has dealt with that. Yeah.
It is not. It is not. We are not training. We are not training teachers.
We're doing the training of the 2 years in the teachers training college.
This thing. We need to demystify it. And Ken, I think Kenyans should really keep on asking this hard question. I'm a trained teacher for the deaf, and I know the effort that goes in for you to be prepared to be a teacher for the children living with the disabilities. Because what we were trained on is at the heart of what CBC intends to achieve. And Dr. Juan put it across, that you're talking about a differentiated. The mission of this curriculum is nurturing every child's potential. We need to ask ourselves this question: what does it mean to nurture every child's potential? Considering that education plays an equalization function, how do you cure the tension of giving all children this kind of education and at the same time seeking to realize the potential of every child? It is a lot of effort which people are not seeming to appreciate. And that's why for me, CBC is a good thing. It can work if only we appreciate the magnitude of what it takes.
Okay.
And therefore plan on it. Okay. So that we don't keep on saying that it is not necessary. I can assure you that you need a complete retooling of our teachers. Yeah. The World Bank report puts that 59% of the teachers are struggling with the content. Our curriculum itself is purely content-based. It is a knowledge-based. Okay. Yet teachers are struggling. I have personally sat in a classroom, and I'm sorry because I'm just using an outlier, where a teacher had written on the chalkboard, she is a smart boy. And this is a teacher teaching English class 5. What was happening to those children? From morning to evening, Monday to Friday, first term to third term. It is massacre. So when we really sit and say that it is not a big issue, yes, teachers have not been trained on that, but I think let's appreciate the effort that goes in. If tomorrow morning I have to leave my house, and my house help tells me that I'm not ready to sit in your house, I must really rethink. Okay. I think we should not really simplify this issue by just saying that they are on the other side, they are raising. I think we need to appreciate that, yes, we have a problem. CBC could be a good thing, but what does it take for us to achieve? And that's why I go for what NTV put it across. We need a handshake.
Okay, we need
and
to
not
come
just a
back to the
handshake
table.
with just one person,
Yes.
but a handshake with everyone. We
in the
should
sector.
never close opportunities for conversation. And that's why I'm very grateful to Dr. Juan, because he's opened his doors. Let everyone come. We should never close opportunities for us to talk. Even as a couple, the day you stop talking in your house
The
is
day
the
you begin fighting.
Exactly.
All right, I'm told, I know you really want to add your voice to this, but I'm told by my director, we need to take a short break, 1 minute. When we come back, I'd like you to begin from that, responding on how simple or how difficult the teachers can perceive this is. And that would that mean going forward or remaining where we are or rethinking it altogether? Right, let's take a break. We're back in a moment. We're in studio with Dr. Juan, Julius, Janet Oko, and Amos Kaburu, stakeholders in the education sector. Remarkably, they've been involved in this process throughout. So very interesting. They have views from here to the other side. So if you send a fake one like Josh, you'll be called out. You'll be called out. All right. I know I want to speak to the CEO, but this is from MP for Homa Bay, Peter Kaluma. It's very interesting. He's a stakeholders. He says, what is this about? What is this? Is it about just forcing down policies without full involvement of the people? I know we've spoken about public participation. Janet spoke about it, and he says, I am a member of parliament, and I just don't understand this thing and why the government is imposing it on my child. How do you expect other Kenyans to understand? How does the ministry convince any reasonable person that those 2 to 4 day seminars can prepare teachers to train learners under CBC? Where are the facilities for this thing? Basically, what I get from Kaluma, even as you respond, is the same questions: infrastructure, human resource issues, right? Preparedness and all. And the same questions that can be answered.
Let me tell you that Kenyan teachers, despite the outliers that Bwana Kaburu was talking about, are some of the best teachers in this region. And that has been proven when you see their demand in other areas, in other countries. I've sat in classes in countries. I've sat in classes in Uganda. I've sat in classes in South Africa, in the township schools, and I've seen teachers perform. So let us not underrate the ability of Kenyan teachers. But let me go back to the idea of preparation of teachers. I think I already said it.
Yeah, you spoke about it.
I don't need to repeat that. What we are giving teachers is an orientation. And let me explain that when you're doing an orientation for a new curriculum, you don't take teachers out of class and go and keep them somewhere for 3 months that you're training them. I tell you, by the time you're through with that, you'll have done nothing. You give them orientation, then you release them to class. Then you proceed to do mentorship and see how they are implementing.
Who proceeds? Who proceeds?
The curriculum support officers. By the way, I should have explained how we handle our training.
Okay.
We have the national trainers. Then we go to the second level with what we call the TOTs and champion teachers. Then we have curriculum support officers, who are zonal inspectors of schools. These are the guys, these are the people who mentor teachers within their various zones. That is how the training takes place. And I need to explain that training, just like any other human resource, improvement, is as something which is a continuous process. We did training in 2018. We did training in April. We shall be doing training orientation or training in August. We shall be doing it in December.
So it's a continuous process.
It is always a continuous process. That is how you deal with the training of teachers. And then let me explain another thing as well. As I talk to you now, because now we understand what the curriculum looks like, because I've had people saying that we needed to have reformed our teacher training colleges curriculum before we come to this. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
You develop a curriculum, you see the demands of the curriculum, then you go back and prepare a training curriculum for teachers that will feed into this curriculum. So because now we understand what is happening, as I talk to you now, we are developing training for teacher training colleges at diploma level.
Okay.
That is if you start with the teacher training colleges, what are you preparing them? Because you have not even seen the curriculum they're going to teach.
Okay.
So these are things that we are dealing with. And what I'm asking Kenyans, and I think this is what we should do, and that's what everybody is saying. We have not said we have locked anybody out. We need the views. The way we are discussing, I don't think that when we are here after discussion, we just go and lock ourselves and continue doing what we have people who are taking notes, and we engage. Like as I talk to you now, we have a team that is being trained this week, and these are curriculum developers. Tomorrow they're traveling to the counties. On Thursday and Friday, they will be in schools with the teachers, trying to see how they're working. The following week, they will be in schools, the same schools, just sitting to see how teachers are interpreting the curriculum. Then we come back and reflect and see what then can we do differently.
Amos, you will respond to this, but the phone lines are open. If you're a teacher who has a concern with how this is being implemented, we'll be glad to take your call. But if you're just a parent also who also has concerns, the phone numbers are on your screen. Call in and ask the questions. And I'll begin with Vitalis just before Amos responds. Vitalis, good afternoon or good evening. What's your concern? I've been working the whole day. Good evening, Vitalis. What's your concern or question, and to who?
Yes, my concern is that they have done the research as technocrats. But the question is that, is it logical for them to introduce that changes at the middle of the year?
Okay. Sorry? All right. So he's asking, you've done research as the technocrat. I believe this is for you. Yeah. But is it necessary that this is being introduced in the middle of the year? That's what he's asking, because we are...
I think, again, just like the other question, the curriculum was introduced, was rolled out in January, at the beginning of the year. Actually, one of the questions we should be asking ourselves, the people who are raising certain issues now, like now telling us to stop and go back. Why didn't they raise this in January when we started?
But you see, that phone call tells me something, ladies and gentlemen, that there is no information outside. If that's a parent, and I'm assuming Vitalis is a parent from Diwa, if he's asking why is it being implemented, it means this is the time he's had the debate.
Now, you know the beauty?
Huge concern.
Let me just say something.
Yes.
The beauty that this debate has brought Kenyans to the fore to see that something is something.
No, because you're forcing it down their throats. Probably they're choking.
Do you know what is going to happen next?
Yes.
Now, because last year, and actually led by the former minister, Dr. Mina, we did 47 counties public engagement. We started from Narok. that is where it was launched. Then we spread out to all the 47 countries,
Okay.
and we closed it in Kakamega.
Okay.
Now, because this debate has come up, we are planning another one.
No, you need to do
No,
it.
I think really, and this I've shared with Dr. Juan, and I've said this is a very critical process.
Yeah.
That you know, education touches really on every household, and therefore it's important for us to say that probably even the meetings are not enough. We need a better communication strategy, so that the parents and everybody else is made aware of what all this is about, so that even the falsehoods that are being circulated around, probably it could even help you to explain to the people what exactly this process is about. The communications, that one, I think, Dr. Joan, there is something that we need. The biggest room in the house is always room for improvement. There is something better that can be done. But then again, I would always say, and I want to give you a very typical example. The other day, the Huduma number, that so many days are open for us to go to the station and pick the numbers.
Register, yes.
Then we don't go. But the last day, the day of the deadline,
everyone
now rushes. Does it tell us something about Kenyans that this discussion has been out here, but then when it hits us is when now we want to bring everything, we want to ask. I think there's something typical about it, and I just wanted to really
every day should be a deadline.
Feel what is coming from the member of parliament.
Yes.
Especially knowing that there is a session of paper that is in parliament. I don't know what other role probably an institution like KICD should do when already there is a document in parliament.
Okay.
And this is a member of parliament who is saying, I don't know. So I really, it really baffles me.
Okay.
Who else is handling it? Because the entire responsibility is not for KICD. There are components for everyone. There is what KICD should do. There is what Parliament should do. There is including the resourcing of this. It is not for Dr. Joan to tell us where the money is going to come from, but there are other institutions that are charged with that mandate.
Okay.
Have they been mobilized? You know, probably.
The
Have
work
they
is
been
just
lobbied?
to develop it and then put it out there. Let me hear from Amos.
Yeah, the tragedy with this side of the world is that everything is aspirational. Even the kind of curriculum we are developing is highly aspirational. Yeah. That's why we really want to go to the US, pick up what works, and we bring it over here, go to Finland and such. And so in the process, it creates a lot of conflicts. I have personal issues with the technical aspects of the curriculum. Because I have them, I know where to take them. So I will not begin belaboring Kenyans and disturbing them over here that I have one or two. But let me come back to the whole issue about how we are rolling out and why this process does not inspire public confidence and how government will easily have got it right. The process of conscientizing service providers is complex but equally not complex. You need to appreciate those of us who are involved in data collection, the so-called research, and my senior over here has done a lot of work in qualitative research. We talk about the CAP methodology. Knowledge, attitudes, and practice. The fact that people know that if you steal, you'll be taken to committee does not stop people from stealing. So the fact that you keep on hammering information out here that we have CBC and CBC is about this does not mean that Kenyans will really have a deeper understanding. What is happening with our teachers? Because considering that this is a highly shift in pedagogy, will be a lot to do with attitudes and building confidence that teachers believe that what we are doing, we are not going to be victimized by it. Do we have space in this country where people are free to make mistakes and really be held their hands that it is okay to make mistakes? Because what we have seen, and why I'm saying that, what government is doing does not inspire a lot of public confidence. We saw how they bungled the laptop project. Nothing to show for it. NEMIS came the other day. I mean, beautifully designed, supported by World Bank. And sometimes you really wonder. You send children to college, they stay there for 2 terms, you expel them because they have not met requirements, and nobody is held responsible. You come to the steps and tell people that we are not ready for our curriculum the following day. You come and you tell people that we are ready. These are issues that really win that public confidence. Okay. So I think that government needs to get its act a little bit together. Work on its government communication infrastructure, really get out there and really understand that you may not be so good at articulating issues, but how do you partner with the media? How do you partner with the religious organizations? How do you partner with the different people who are involved in the process of talking with people, for people to really understand? Because I think for me, I just don't understand why we should really believe that it is cast on a stone. And as I've said, I have my own issues with the CBC, but I know where to take them. But as far as rollout is concerned, I think that is something that we are fundamentally missing that can end up really jeopardizing even. I don't want to measure the good in it by saying whether it's a little or a lot, but I think that we could easily stand to lose just because we are now dividing people into two. Because there's now a feeling that we've stayed on this thing for so long, and we have witnessed these things happening. Previously, Kenya as well, we are now tired of this constitutional discussion. Let us have whatever constitution it is. And now 10 years down the line, Kenyans are asking themselves, did we need this institution? Did we require them? But just by passing something because it's out of fatigue that you feel you're completely tired, we really have to move on. This drive of we really have to accept and move on. Time has come and we have to close this thing. The train has left the station. SGR in itself is designed to go all the way to Malaba. It's being implemented in phases. It doesn't end in Nairobi. So the fact that the train has left the station does not mean that it cannot reach the sea where there is no railway line, and therefore it has nowhere to go. And it could even have lack of fuel in the process. So I think when we use some of these statements, they really soil that environment, make it more difficult. And when you begin calling for war, declaring that if you want war, we are ready for it, you begin charging your members that you cannot teach this.
That's where the problem is.
It just makes the environment more.
But you have to agree, as Janet speaks, that those could also be utilized by people who are anti the curriculum for sideshows. You might also agree with me that those are just sideshows also.
Yeah. And you know, as he says, I really want to, I'm at pains to try and explain some things. Why? Because sometimes, you know, when you speak from experience, seeing where we have come with the education reforms, and to get to a place where the government is so open, you know, the government is so open and is leading from the front in terms of saying, like he quoted the president, he's been leading some of these initiatives. It's really not very easy to get all this political goodwill. And I want to say that, and I'm speaking to all the education sectors, the unions and everybody else, that we are living in such a time where I am not sure we will experience such a time again, where we have all these education reforms and the government is happy to fund the education. Remember, we've been talking about free secondary education. It is now happening. The government has said yes, because they understand, let's do it. Yeah. We've been on this issue of curriculum reforms for a very, very, very long time. And that's why sometimes you hear people saying, we've discussed it. Here is an open window. The government is willing to lead from the front. It is not easy, and probably the next government that will come, it will have different priorities. And this is what we are saying. Can we pick what is good, what can we be able to run with? Because a lot of these things that we are discussing here, a lot of it is English. Today I saw it should not be named CBC, it should be named I don't know what. All this is English. Where the rubber meets the road. Today I saw an analysis on the daily. The legitimate questions that are being asked.
Yes.
The teachers are not fully prepared. Can we deal with this issue on the table? KICD sit here, TSC sit here. What are we doing about teacher prepare? Let's not be all over the place.
Not even training on, even the child or pupil-teacher ratio in the classrooms is a question that is being asked. And I think it's a legitimate question coming from NAT, because they know how staffing is done.
But you see, again, another question, another issue. As Dr. Joan put it, we wouldn't want to get to a situation where we are saying, and unless we have XYZ number of teachers, then we can't, unless we have all this. Because why are you not using the same argument to say, can we stop the implementation of 844? Because if we don't have enough teachers, why are we implementing?
Because we still don't have enough teachers.
We still don't have enough teachers.
I've gone round and round, but I know you want to speak, Dr. There are 3 phone calls that I'm going to take. After the 3 phone calls, we'll come back and just continue our discussion here. I'll begin with Justin. Justin is calling us from KC. Justin, good evening. What's your concern? And if you have a question, who are you asking it to?
I'm Justin from KC. I was just asking one question here.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to know whether is there any problem if we can postpone till next year?
Okay.
So that we can give room for consultation.
Okay.
And must start now.
You need to turn down the volume of your television, Justin, if you have to ask us a question. But we've got his question. Is it possible? That was a question I was going to ask. Is it possible to postpone it? Second question, Arnold?
Yeah, so that we give room for more consultation.
More consultation. All right. Let's go to Kitui now. And Benson, good evening. What's your question or concern?
Good evening. I'm from Kitui, and I'm a master trainer. I've been to KIZB where they developed the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key issues that I've seen is about attitude, change of attitude.
Okay.
Most of the teachers, and especially the implementers, have an issue about attitude which need to change, especially when it comes to the orientation.
Okay.
Then the second issue is about the sincerity of Kenyan people.
Mm-hmm.
That when it comes to the evaluation, there will be a summative evaluation that will be going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue is about their sincerity. We are supposed to award the students and the pupils on their talents and the potentials across the country.
Okay.
Will there be a uniform template that will make sure that whatever is being done is uniform
across the board?
And
okay.
You don't have issues that are biased on one side, and then we have an issue within the market.
Great, thanks.
And finally,
yes,
people fear change. We need to change.
Okay.
People fear change. Could you also be able to address the issue of change and the fear of change within our country?
Great, thanks, Benson from Kitui. And finally, let's go to Uganda. Peter, good evening, and what's your question or concern?
This is Peter Mulama.
Yes.
A Kenyan living in Uganda.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, I think teachers are just fearing change just like any other person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think soon teachers will be obsolete, just like other professions.
Mm.
We just need the curriculum and put it online, and people get it for free. So they should be very careful. And any teacher who doesn't want to teach should resign. There are so many other people who want the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter seems to be working for the Ministry of Education. Thanks, Peter. Kenya living in Uganda. But legitimate questions from Justin, Benson, and Peter. And let's go with
basically, what I see here is what we call legitimate discussions.
Yes.
People need to engage. People need to understand. For example, I mentioned 3 things that we need to deal with when you're rolling out the curriculum. So the question of postponing does not arise. What we need to ask, what can we do differently as we go forward?
Okay.
If we need more training of teachers, let's move on with that. The government is now continuously recruiting teachers. I think the pace of recruitment has really gone up. So we need more teachers. That is what we need to address, what we need to put in the table so that Parliament allocates more money for teachers to be recruited. These are legitimate consultations.
In other words, before you move on, in other words, the train has left the station.
No, you see, let me tell you something.
Yes.
A curriculum is not like a vehicle where you drive, you stop somewhere, then turn and go back. In fact, I heard some people saying that, I don't know, South Africa started and stopped it after 3 months, after 6 months, Britain started and stopped it. I don't know where that is coming from, because I've been to those countries. People meet challenges, and as they meet challenges, they adjust to fit what will fit them in that particular context.
Okay.
So
in other words, the train has left the station.
In other words, the curriculum has been rolled out. So what we need to do is what do we need to do differently? Now, consultations, I agree, that will continue. In fact, we are starting another phase of engagement towards the end of June, and I think that will be a good opportunity, because now Kenyans seem charged to engage and to understand more. I fully agree with the issue of attitude change. I think I can deal with this in relation to fear for change. I think probably we need a very good strategy for change management, so that we embed this within the reform, we embed this within the training, so that as we go to train, we don't just train pedagogy and how to do assessment and all that, but we embed change of attitude and change management. And then the question of standard assessment, thank God I carried it here and I even marked it. This training manual that we are giving out to the curriculum support officers has a very nice component of competency, a manual for competence-based assessment.
Okay.
And let me also add that, when you talk of competence-based curriculum, or I know some people call it skills-based, Kenya is not an island. I mean, over 75 countries as we talk now are teaching CBC. And we are doing this within the context of the East African community.
Okay. You've aligned it to this.
The East African Treaty agreed that the East African community countries are supposed to align to harmonize their curriculum. That is chapter 16.
Okay.
They even went ahead and developed a framework of CBC of how we are supposed to align it.
So this is happening in Uganda, Tanzania.
Rwanda has already rolled out.
Okay.
South Sudan already rolled out.
Okay.
So we are not doing anything in isolation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Janet.
Yes.
You can address what he's talking about.
Especially the question
fear,
of postponement.
postponement.
And then I would ask, for example, maybe the problem is about communication, but what we have not done in 9 years, I don't know, adding 1 more year, how we will be able, to do whatever it is. And then again, I'm really saying whatever Kaburu talked about a handshake, but then again sitting round the table and really what are the issues? Not necessarily being all over the place. What is the issue? Is about teacher training, or what kind prescribe? Because the kind of teacher training that has been done, critique it. Say, no, this is what they did not do, so that they can also understand where exactly is the challenge. But you cannot say teachers have not been effectively trained, and probably there is some input that you have that could probably even be able to help us. And then also fast-tracking other issues. It should be understood that it is not the role. The KICD has got no role in the session paper and so on. Those are issues of parliament. They give feedback to the Ministry of Education and so on. So those issues can always be fast-tracked. What I want to say here is we are the same people that have told Kenyans that 844 is bad for us. And I know for sure it has not done this country very good justice. There has been so much wastage. We can now not renege. I'm listening to those people who again are sitting and justifying why we need 844 just for fear of change, of probably because of other interests. But let us be people of integrity, that we sat down and agreed that surely after studies that went round, there are so many commissions that have gone. So when the public is being told that the process is being rushed, yet we've been on this thing for 9 years, it becomes a little bit confusing. So it's about maybe and Dr. Joan and the ministry can commit to really give a very comprehensive brief on some of the issues that are being raised, and then also asking the other side, can you have integrity enough to tell us? The ministry and KICD have told you this is what we have done about teacher training. So what is your take? Because you cannot just refuse a process and refuse and say, no, teachers have not been trained effectively, and you put a full stop at that end. And then you open another one and say, there is no infrastructure, and therefore we are not helping.
And you say there's no human resource.
There is no human resource. We are not helping this country.
Okay.
And then also that the Ministry of Education, it is not helpful for you to say that testing me, or it is not going to help anyone. This is an opportunity as a sector. We cannot afford to lose it.
Okay.
Whatever it takes, be it bending over backwards, is there somebody's ego that we need to massage? Please
do it.
Let us do it for the sake of these children who need this thing so badly.
You know, the funniest thing, as you answer, the funniest thing is this war has metamorphosized, and it looks as if it's war between the ministry and the union on the other end, right? Which is very wrong. One more call, Wandera from Westlands, then we'll not take any more calls because we are running out of time. But Wandera, good evening. What's your concern or question?
Hello.
Go ahead, Wandera.
Yes, this is Wandera from Westlands. I have a question.
Yes. Are you a teacher? Are you a teacher or a trainer?
Yes, I'm a teacher.
Okay, go ahead.
By profession, I'm a teacher.
Okay.
My question is, we looked at the laptop issues whereby the laptops were given to schools, and we've gone to some local schools in the villages. Those laptops are just full of dust. And because we are being told teachers were trained, I'm not quite sure if everyone was trained on how to use the laptop. Number two, on the same about this issue of confidence, Madam Janet has always had issues with the teachers' competency on the previous curriculum, the 844. How sure is she that she has now confidence in teachers today to implement this CBC?
All right. Thank you.
Yes, but I appreciate the Bwana Jones, and for whatever we are good to go for these changes. But let's do it in a sober mind. Let's not have these issues people fighting over.
All right. Great. And thank you very much. And finally, Ratken from Nakuru. Good evening, Ratken. What's your question or concern?
Good evening, Ken, and the panelists.
I just wanted to say a few things. And number one is that, unfortunately, the process has been riddled with a lot of hearsay. And I think every time we have a politicians meddling in some of these things, the truth just disappears.
Okay.
And so my mind says that it is important for Kenyans to be able to understand where is the truth, who is not telling us the truth, or who is telling us the truth. So that now, even as a parent, even as my children go to school, then I'm able to understand that whatever we are getting is the truth. And so that even as the government tries to bring in the CBC, then I'm able to support it. But every other time a politician stands, every other time government stands, it is like a war. People are fighting, and you don't seem to really understand where the truth is. And that is my concern.
Thank you. Legitimate concern, as the CEO will say, those are what we call legitimate concerns. But you still get the sense of the misinformation or lack of information outside here. That's the concern. I think there's one to you. No, he would speak first, yes. And also address his concerns if there's something you can pick out.
I don't think that summarizing these issues into communication really does justice to the Kenyan people. And I'll say a few things. That the premises of CBC need to be relooked at. If you are if you are really convinced that CBC is what Kenya needs, I am not very sure that that is what Kenya needs. But if you are really convinced that CBC is what Kenya needs, then you need to rethink about the premises. And one of them is parental participation. Which kind of parents can deliver CBC? And that's the more reason why for KICD, it has to go back and ask itself. It did a good thing to give us a curriculum mission, nurturing every child's potential. What does it mean? What will it take for you to deliver and nurture the potential for every child? It is not just enough to say that we seek to nurture every child's potential. Because if we are not careful, the greatest challenge in our education today is the widening inequalities.
Okay.
And we seem to be doing very little to reduce these inequalities. Sometimes we may think that the decisions we are making would really reduce the inequalities, but in the process could really end up widening the inequalities. So I think that it is important that we don't just reduce this issue into a communication, but rather go back to even the entire design of the curriculum that we are giving to the Kenyan people, so that we ask ourselves, can this curriculum stand the tenacity for the next 50 years? I've heard people talking about postponing. And when I hear people say that we've been on this thing for the last 9 years, I sit and wonder. In 2003, a very prominent cabinet minister stood up and told Kenyans that they could not have a constitution in 100 days. Because what was meant is that the 100 days were not calendar days, but one day was served in the first year, there was a half a day spent in the other year. It doesn't matter. It's not about the number of years. Okay. It's about the investment that we are putting in for those 9 years. Are we really deliberate to develop an education system that works for all children?
Okay.
We need to ask ourselves this question.
All right.
Can we give all children all the education? Can we give some children some education? Or do we really need to separate education from training? Because I think one of the fundamental challenges in the design and the philosophy of CBC is lumping education and training together. To imagine that we are developing an education system that is going to deliver human resource. But it's not supposed just to be the case. Because when the moment you define it from competence and talking about pathways, even before 12 years are over, I mean, Ken, this is for a fact. When you tell a 15-year-old to start specializing, what are you expecting of them? What do they know about life?
Okay.
I think that for me, these are serious issues that must be addressed. And what we are seeing right now in grade 1, grade 2, and 3 is child play. If you are talking about issues coming, 3 years from now when we talk about junior secondary school, issues are going to face you. So if government is strongly convinced that it has what it takes, it has got thick skin like that one of a hippopotamus, all the best.
Happened. All right, Janet, there was something specific to you. He said, I think this was Rotiken, he said that you have traditionally or you have previously questioned the competence of teachers. What makes you think that that will improve going forward now that we have this CBC?
Have
you really done it? Have you really been questioning the competence?
Like I said, studies have been there, have been shared, questioning, and even studies showing that our children are not learning across grades. The studies have been shared, and it's really, you cannot argue with research. You cannot argue with research findings. But the thing that should really come out is that CBC is not really what is coming to solve all the evils that have bedeviled the sector. I think we are placing so much responsibility on one single element of the reforms that we need in the sector. We need reforms in how we have been training our teachers. And that is where you saw the confusion about admitting D+, about admitting, there are reforms that are needed in so many areas of our education sector. But what exactly are we saying? We are saying that discussions have been held about reforming our curriculum for obvious things, and they have been articulated in the past about the wastages that we have, through the 844, about how important it is to nurture every child's potential. How we cannot be able to achieve that through the 844, because by the time someone is leaving at Form 4 and you give them an E, and then that is why they are finding their way, that they were a DJ, they were talented, you've already condemned them. I can give you examples. When you hear the song Willie Paul singing, Binguni Hakuna Degree, it tells you something. That child did not have a degree. There's something they feel about having inferior grades. So even when they go outside and they excel through hard work, through their own hard work, there is something that was stamped on them that really interferes with the self-esteem, with the way other people see them, which is what all this want to be changed. And therefore, I really appreciate the efforts that have gone on about retooling the teachers. And that is why I'm saying that we have been given feedback that is not sufficient. And that is why we say, can we come back to the table and see, we want to move on. We want to move on because it is criminal for this country to be releasing 32,000 is every year. And we are not telling them what is the way forward. It is criminal for us to proceed with, for example, at 2010, our transition rates from secondary to the university was 6.5%. We cannot proceed like that as a country, and I think we've agreed. Okay. The contentions are on technical issues. And let me tell you, there are some technical issues that really, to be very fair to processes, that you can take out there. There are responsibilities, there are institutions that we have in this country, such as the KICD. Sit down and give us, because sometimes
But the question
Kenyans
is KICD listening to these concerns? That's the question.
It is for Dr. Juan to tell us, because I think the proper thing is for him to also tell us. Let him not tell us that we are listening. How are you listening? Explain to the Kenyans what mechanisms of feedback, of interaction and interface with the public that you have, so that the public can actually know that you really
as you say that, Janet, I'm reminded to what you said earlier, that the fact that you're given an opportunity to contribute doesn't mean that your idea has to be embraced. So even as they listen, that is the principle of public participation. When you go to the table, it doesn't mean that your views must be taken on board. Yes. All right.
Okay. I don't know whether to go for the technical issues.
Start with the concerns of the viewers.
No, let's look at it in terms of the truth. And I really agree with that person that, in all this drama, in all this debate, the truth is lost. And for us as KICD, the truth starts with the learner. When in your village a child gets into standard 1, in your school by the end of standard 8, are they all there? As they move from standard 8 up to Form 4, by the time they finish Form 4, can you go to those who started standard 1 and account for each learner and where they have gone to and what are they doing with themselves? If we can't do that, then it takes us the technical part of the curriculum reform that we are doing. And I would want to tell you that in Finland, although it's not good to compare with some of those countries because they have really gone ahead.
Much developed, yes.
In Finland, they have gone into what they want to call phenomena-based curriculum, where a learner goes to school and there's no subject. There's no learning area. They start playing in school and you see which area they want to go to. In Germany, they start dealing with talent right from lower primary. We are not going to those extremes. But the principle of embedding the idea that each learner has something that they want to offer for Kenya today is extremely important, because the system we have now empowers the privileged few who have the cognitive strength at the expense of all the other abilities. So those who will pass very highly will say, wow, you are great people, and we forget this masses. So the principle of all of us appreciating that these learners have something that they can offer is where we start from. After we have started from there, then we start saying, what can drive them into getting into useful engagement even after school if they don't go to the university?
Okay.
So these are the debates that I was saying. These are very technical issues that when we start discussing here, Kenyans will go to sleep. But what I would encourage, like now we have developed with the Parents Association, a parental empowerment and engagement guide. What we are trying to do is to help teachers understand that learning must be a collaborative process, that the school is not isolated from the community, that when a child goes back home, even if your parent or guardian or whoever is not educated like some of us, but you can engage them until they understand that this is what you're doing in school, because the school is supposed to develop character and not just give you a cognitive engagement alone.
Okay.
And that is why we are saying we have to embed values and ethics in this curriculum. And how do you do it? Simply by putting learners, like when they're discussing or you give them work to do, and they appreciate that each of them has something to offer. You don't use this kind of language. Very simple ways of getting learners appreciate what we are complaining about now.
Okay.
Then we start complaining, where did the rain start beating us? But now when we want to put foundations of how we can get out of the rain, then we start wondering, are you sure we need it?
I think the concern is, from what I get even from all of you, you agree that CBC is not a bad thing. And even if there are concerns about it, then they can be addressed. Yeah. But I think more is how it has been done. I think it's more about communication. I think it's more about the foundation, how this has been done, and how it's been implemented. I think those are the concerns. And across the board, we share in every concern that we have had tonight. All right, let's do the second last part of the show. And this is where we show you a cartoon of the week. And I'd like your comments on this cartoon. Let's take a look. All right, so that's the cartoon. If you can say it properly, it will perhaps be behind you here also. It's one of the dailies, and that's Professor Magoha fixing a car, and right there, it's the engine part is named Sosion. So basically, tightening the loose nut. He's fixing nut finally from the sentiment, from what is fixed. That's what I think. But let me begin with you.
I think, first of all, that's part of what I put as part of my opening remarks, that I think this is really casualizing the discussion to look like it's just about the CS and the K.
The union, yes.
And therefore predisposes the discussion just to be about personalities. I think that what we should really be debating are the issues on the table. And we agree that this curriculum reform process, within the 16 months that we are the former cabinet secretary, very little was taking place. And curriculum reform process required a leadership. So the question we should be discussing right now is whether indeed the leadership as we have it right now is inspiring confidence to bring everyone on board and really to give the Kenyan children that education that will support them to nurture their full potential. So I think that there's nothing wrong in people voicing their concerns because they mean well. I am 100% sure that all Kenyans mean well for our children. It's only that it differs in terms of perspective. Okay. What government takes to be the right thing for our children may not necessarily be perhaps how parents view it. And even most of the time, as Dr. Juan put it, we also forget about the voice of these children. What do we really think about them? So I think that for me, that cartoon a little bit is a bit offensive and should really not be glorified. We should never reach a point at which we reduce serious national conversations just to be about personalities.
All right. Janet, you have been wondering or just looking.
Yeah, that there is the problem that we have in the education sector. And the use of force, as you can see, you know, I'm just trying to remember how my literature taught me to analyze stuff, and you can see. But I think there's something, this is art, and it is expressing something. And we cannot hold the drawer of the cartoon, because there is something he had observed for him to be able to bring out that kind of a diagram, which shows us how things are happening between the ministry and probably a section of the stakeholders. And I want to say that for the Ministry of Education, there is nobody else charged with the responsibility of delivering this curriculum apart from you, because even KICD is a saga, is under the Ministry of Education. And therefore, we are expecting, as a father, wood to all the children. All the stakeholders are children of the Ministry of Education. And you have children, some of who are polite. You have children, some of who, are not very polite in the way they do their things. But it is your responsibility as a father to know how you want to interact and to deal with all your stakeholders. But then also, as a stakeholders, we have a responsibility to support. Let us come on the table with an open mind. Okay. Because as for me, CBC is something that all of us have been praying, or rather, let me not call it CBC because Kaburu, I can see he has his share of problems. But let us talk about the reforms around the curriculum. And if you think that this is an open window for us to reform the curriculum for the benefit of all children, come to the table with an open mind and come with a critique, not to criticize or not to look like you want to carry the day as the person that stopped the reforms or as the person that shaped. Let us drop all that. Come to the table with an open mind. Tell us what is your share of responsibility in this. Even you, what haven't you? Because someone is telling me, you've been talking about 9 years. Can all of us account for what we have done
in that 9 years?
In that 9 years, especially as stakeholders that sat on the table, as the Ministry of Education is telling Kenyans what they did. I think also there are some section of stakeholders who ought to tell Kenyans, what did you do on the table to support the reforms?
Okay. Daktari.
Thank you. Allow me
to skip the cartoon.
Allow me to say something. Let me encourage my sister Janet not to fear calling the curriculum CBC. And let me explain that regardless of a name, a rose by any other its name will smell as sweet. And let me explain that even when we talk about CBC, there are certain fundamental principles, but implementing a curriculum depends on the context of the country that is implementing it. The way we implement CBC today in Kenya will not be the same with the way that it's been being implemented in Canada. So let us not fear the name. Let us look at those principles. But when we come to the Kenyan context, we look at what suits us. Okay. Because our dynamics can never be the same to any other country. So let's not shy away. There's no problem. Those we can deal with. But otherwise, I think the main issue, and I think they've all said it, I think for me, these are distractions, but again, a good drawing for whoever did it. Let's focus on the child.
Okay.
I've said it and I will keep repeating it.
It's about the child.
It's about the child. For us, if we started from the child coming up, then we'll see where we fit in. But if we start from ourselves going down to the child, because you see, we are exiting the scene. What will these children have for themselves in future?
Okay.
Yeah, I think for me that is the main thing.
Focus on the child.
The child in the next 20 years, because many of us will not be there.
Okay. Many of us.
Yeah, some of us.
Right. A good way to sum up his thoughts.
Yeah.
And finally, tonight we take you back to the time that 844 began. And just like the proposed change of curriculum from outcome-based to competency-based, there was a lot of gray areas then. Parents were anxious and students were confused. Tonight on Time Bar, we tell you the story through the eyes of anxious parents at that time. The year is 1984, the month is October, and just like the issues being raised right then, now there were many challenges then. It wasn't very well understood to begin with, and the infrastructure was not ready. More than 460,000 students were transitioning at that time. It was touted as the most radical and expensive education system change since independence. According to then director J.B. Ndungu, the physical facilities will cost anything between 80 and 100,000 shillings. Now, primary school will require about 11,540 teachers to man classes 8 at that time. By the fall of January 1985, then there was, the teachers were supposed to go or begin in January of 1985. Then there was the curriculum to be set. There were the need for stationaries, there were the need for teaching aids and other preparations. All this compounded, affirmed the fear that the system, which is now being overhauled, will not succeed. Well, the change is painful, but times have changed, and the fears which were alive 34 years ago will have been mitigated by civic education and proper boardroom interventions. Same thing we are talking about today, right? A good place to end tonight's show. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming and sharing with us your perspective. Remember the day we stop talking, what Janet says, and you say, we begin to fight, right? Thank you for coming, and thanks for watching. Have a good night. Next week on Tuesday, beginning 9 on NTV Tonight, and of course on Sidebar. Good night. We go off air, but we're still online. We'll be looking at all your responses.